Okay. All right. Good. Okay. So we need to know what are the, apart from music, does Africa have any contribution? Is this just one of those tall tales? Who would hear about that? Then we need to also know, if you don't hear it today, we need to interrogate it. What are the benefits and disadvantages of sports in Africa? I have my own, but I'm going to hold my fire. What can we know about North African football leagues? There's something called the league. And I hope Ebi would explain what, we have local leagues, we have grassroots leagues, we have national leagues, we have professional leagues. And then the big one is in Europe. It's called the European Professional League. Everybody wants to play in that league. What are these leagues about? Now, how can we talk about football or sports generally and not talk about female football clubs on the African continent? You know, Shelley's played football and she knows the kind of discrimination that comes from female sports. Maybe will be telling us about, you know, is there anything new that we need to know? Okay. There are sports publications, magazines, radio programs, TV programs, but there's one called Sports News Africa. You can always check that up. And everybody knows that there's money to be made from sports on the African continent. The question you should record and ask yourself, who is making the money? Show me the money. Where is the money when it comes to sports in Africa? Okay, we have Dr. Eliana is also joining us. She is an immigration expert, and she has a lot of first-hand experience about children moving from across borders and stuff. And this is also about cross-border movement. Before I continue, let me play a clip very quickly from Ebi, and then I would yield the floor to her. Okay. Let me see. No, let me stop sharing. Okay. Okay. Those at home might not be able to see it, but I'm going to send them the link so they can see it themselves.
All documents submitted to people need to be submitted in their original format and, if applicable, translated into one of the 4 official languages. Failure to do so may lead in that document or those documents being disregarded. So when FIFA receives documents that have not been submitted in one of the 4 official languages, you would usually get an email from one of the representatives asking you to resubmit those documents in one of the 4 official languages. So there is a need. However, it's your responsibility to know about these 4 official languages in the first place, to make sure that you submit them in the first instance, and then you don't have the situation where people come back out and ask you to resubmit documents, which can delay the process and delay you getting a response to your query. In case of any discrepancy in the interpretation of the English, French, Spanish, or German text of these regulations, then the English version shall be used. According to FIFA.com, Arabic has been proposed as the 5th FIFA official language, and this is in recognition of the importance of the Arabic language, which is spoken by millions of people all around the world. Whether or not this will happen, who knows, we'll just have to wait and see. Let's continue to watch this space. As always, if you'd like to connect with me on social media, please do. If you have any questions or any comments, feel free to drop me a line or leave them in the text box below.
Okay. Okay, that's that. Let's now go back to,
Dr.
let's-
Odutola,
yes,
do you mind pasting that YouTube video on the chat so that I can look at it later?
I will do that right now. Okay, good. Yes, you got that on the chat now. Okay, so let me just finish my presentation. Okay, so there is also a Sports and Creative Institute, and it's a non-profit organization supporting Africans in building a sustainable sports and creative ecosystem through excellent research, advisory, and advocacy. I want you to please take note of this whole idea of an ecosystem. An ecosystem meaning that there are so many ancillaries, organizations, agencies, institutions that tie to sports. There's advertising, there is foreign relations, there is politics. Sports tries to insulate the games from politics. But hey, tell that to the Marines, that there is no sports in politics. And Russia and Belarus have been eliminated and ejected from some games. When things happen, if your country does something that FIFA or any of the governing bodies are not happy with, they just kick you out. And yet they say there is no sports in politics. But that ecosystem involves a whole load of things. If you introduce sports to a community you're going to work in, there are so many things that you begin to get to understand about the community. So this is why we're thinking, let's listen to Ibi, and this part of it I'm going to keep because we probably might talk about it. So can I yield the floor to you, please?
Yes.
Ibi? Yes.
Yes, that's fine. Hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting me, Dr. Colley.
Yes.
I'm not sure exactly how much time I have, and some of the topics that you picked on, you just prompt me when you need me to comment on those. Right, so I just want to start by saying that football, as we probably know, is a global sport, and it's one of the first sports that I got to know growing up in Nigeria. It's one of those that when I was a kid, you'd have your aunties and uncles, when there's a big Nigeria match. I was born in the UK, but I grew up in Nigeria as well. So you'd have your family members around watching football, and when Nigeria scores, you can literally hear the whole city shaking. Dr. Colley may be able to explain that as well. Just the excitement, the love. You'll see people that are fighting, hugging each other, just because they're happy that Nigeria has scored a goal. Now, there are obviously other sports, but because of the expenses of some of those, like the training and also buying the equipment, you find that football tends to kind of trump all of them. If you're going swimming, you need to be able to be a member of a club and have the equipment, the floats. If you're playing tennis, you need the rackets, and if you're playing golf, etc. So football is one of those that a lot of people can adopt very simply. I've actually seen young kids just tying rags together, making a football and kicking it with bare feet, so it's one of those that a lot of kids just end up getting involved with. Right, so FIFA, I heard Dr. Colley mention FIFA. So FIFA is the overall governing body for football. And FIFA stands for, it's a French word, but, or a French phrase, should I say, but it basically more or less in English means the International Federation of Football. They govern, and their headquarters is in Switzerland. They have member states underneath them, and these member states more or less govern certain areas of the world, like a certain section of the world. So for instance, the USA, that'll be governed by CONCACAF. You'll have UEFA, which I'm sure you've heard of, that governs Europe. And then in Africa, we have CAF, the Confederation of African Football. Underneath CAF, we also have member states, and there's 54 of those under CAF. And for instance, in Nigeria, we have the Nigerian Football Federation. In Ghana, you have the Ghana Football Association. And within those, you have the football clubs. You actually have smaller, you have other local authorities within those, but I'm not going to go into that kind of detail, but it's just kind of broken down just to make it easier to manage. So if there's any issues, for instance, within Ghana, within clubs in Ghana, the Ghana Football Association will have a look at that. If there's any issues with clubs within Nigeria, the Nigerian Federation will look at that. But if there's an issue with a club in Ghana and Nigeria, so let's say there's been a transfer of a player from a club in Nigeria to a club in Ghana, which I'll come to a bit later as well about the exportation of players, then FIFA will have to step in and take care of that. Right, so there are 54 member states in Africa, so under CAF, and we have African Cup of Nations, which is played every 2 years, and that is basically like our World Cup. You go through the same bidding process as they do, for the World Cup, and one country or sometimes a couple of countries get chosen to host the games, and it's something that everybody looks forward to. Everybody's excited to attend, and everybody's rooting for their countries to win. At the moment, regarding the strength of the teams, Senegal is probably like the strongest because they are the top in the FIFA rankings, because FIFA has rankings that they bring out every month. I don't know if you've heard of like the FIFA rankings, and they probably do it in other sports as well. So we have Senegal, which is West Africa, Morocco, which is North Africa, Egypt, which is North Africa, Nigeria, which is West Africa, Tunisia, which is North, and Algeria, which is North. So they're the first six, and you can see that North Africa does tend to have, their football is quite strong. It's quite developed. So out of the six, there's 4 of them that are Northern African. You may be asking where East Africa and Southern Africa are. East Africa, to be honest, is not all that strong when it comes to football. And South Africa, Southern Africa isn't, but South Africa is quite strong. South Africa is probably the most developed league that we have in Africa. We mentioned that the exportation of players. Now, a lot of players are exported from, say, Ghana, and some of them go to other countries. So some go to South Africa, some are exported to North Africa, some come to Nigeria, which is also in West Africa. You also see the same happening with Nigerian players going to other countries in Africa, but you very rarely see a South African player moving from South Africa and going to another league. Their leagues are very well developed. They're paid good salaries. They have good training pitches and good equipment. So a lot of them are just happy to stay there because from the money they earn, they're able to live a good life and, raise their families with that. Whereas the football development in places like Ghana and Nigeria are still lagging behind quite a lot. Some are worse than others. Nigeria, it's not too bad, but in places like Ghana, their salaries are abysmal. They're really, really bad. So the players, all they're doing is watching some of the influence from UEFA clubs, from European clubs, and they just want to leave. They want to leave. And you find that agents like myself end up going to Africa to take players, to bring them for better opportunities within Europe. And yeah, I guess, some people argue that they should be left and Africa shouldn't be raped of all its talent. But at the same time, the players, the leagues aren't developed enough. The leagues aren't developed enough to leave them there. In Nigeria, we have a league system. So you have the NPFL, the Nigerian Premier League. Then you have, that's probably like the equivalent of like the MLS in the US. Then we have the NNL, which is like the second tier. Is that the USL, I think, in America? And then you have the third league, the NLO. So it's a tier system and you have promotion and demotion, which you don't have in the MLS. In England here, we have the same thing. If you're like in the bottom 3, you get demoted. If you're in the top 3 and you're able to move up, there's promotion and demotion. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about my life as an agent, which I've just done an intro just to give you an idea. Now, what does a football agent do? Now, a football agent acts as a representative or an intermediary for players. And you look at things like the players' contracts, and it could be contracts, either employment contracts, or it could be sponsorship contracts or something like that. Now, those are kind of like the minimum. You know, in everything you have like a minimum requirement. You apply for a job and you'll get a minimum requirement. It doesn't mean if you have more than that, they're not happy with you, but there's some minimum, you know, requirements that they need. So those are kind of the minimum. However, as like me, I do a hell of a lot more than that. I currently manage about 10 players, and they're between the age of 18 and about 22, 23. I have another couple of players I work with as well, 28 and 29 years old, but they're not as needy, should I say, as the younger players. So I've assisted them move home, you know, when they've got a new contract. I've assisted them move home. I've paid for flights for football trials. And what would usually happen is when they pass the trial, then you'd be refunded that money. But if they don't pass the trial, then you lose it. So, and that's one of the things clubs do to ensure that agents aren't just sending them any random players. You have to be very confident that that player has a chance of actually passing that trial before you send the player over. Assisting in renewing of documents. I had to fill in 3 Schengen visa applications about 2 months ago. And currently, I'm in the process of helping a player with his passport. He's playing in Latvia at the moment. He's a Nigerian player playing in Latvia. He needs to renew his passport, but there isn't a Nigerian embassy around. The closest one was Ukraine, but because Ukraine doesn't accept Schengen visa, he'd have to apply for a visa, which is complicated. So you can see some of the complexities that come into, you know, the fact that they have Nigerian passports and they don't have that freedom of movement. So we're actually going to Italy. So he's going to have to fly to Italy to get that done. So I'm assisting with that as well. Sometimes you end up having to be a counselor when they're injured and they're unable to play. You know, they call you very upset, they cry, sometimes even issues with girlfriends. One of the players I was working with got a girl pregnant. So, you know, these are the kind of things sometimes, you know, you take on. Not all agents will do that, because some of them will just see as, you know, they do the minimum, which is to find you a club, help you with your contract negotiation, and then take their percentage, which usually is between 3 and 10%. And FIFA won't allow any more than that. It's in the regulations that you can't actually take more than that. For a sponsorship, I mean, you can negotiate that between you and the player, and that could be, you know, anywhere up to 20%. So other personal things as well you can help players with, or which I help players with. One of my players went to the World Cup in 2018, and his wife had only just come from Nigeria to Italy and was heavily pregnant. So he asked whether she could fly to the UK and stay with me, because he didn't want her staying in a kind of foreign land pregnant on her own. So she came and stayed with me for 6 weeks. You know, so I allowed that, you know, because they come. I've known the player for a long time, and I've spoken to the wife before, so I knew what she was like, and I thought, okay, fine. It's not something I have to do. I could always say no, but I did it. I also mentor the young player. I said that, you know, he got somebody pregnant. I mentor his baby's mom. I mean, he's 6 now, so he's quite a big boy now. But, you know, so these are some of the things that I would do as an agent. So it's not limited to, you know, just contract negotiation. I'm more or less like a mom to them. So I also I do a lot of legal work. So this is something that an agent could do, but I also do it for others as well. I actually do it as a role. So sometimes players get themselves into trouble. You know, maybe they breach their contracts, they don't turn up for training, you know, they get themselves into some disciplinary matter within the club. So this is again where I would step in. Or there are cases of players who have raped, you know, they've been accused of rape or charged with rape, and they'll need a criminal defense lawyer, you know. So again, you'll step in and help with things like this. Now, FIFA has its own kind of jurisdiction, you know, where you can submit claims if you're not happy with certain things. So if there's a breach of contract between a player and a club, or 2 clubs maybe, FIFA is competent to hear that, as long as they're not from the same association. Like I mentioned before, if it's 2 clubs within Nigeria, or a club and a player within Nigeria, then it would have to be heard by Nigeria. But if it's of an international dimension, then FIFA is competent to hear that. So I do stuff like that as well. So I'll take a statement from the player or the club, and based on knowledge and the information I have, I would submit a claim to FIFA and then, you know, help them to resolve that, either get the money that they're owed or stop them from paying money they don't believe they're owed, etc. So, Dr. Kole, what else do you want to touch on here? Let's see.
We need to talk about the female football,
Female football.
the nature of female football in, yes. Please go ahead, Dr. Liana.
Hi, thank you. Ebby, is that how you pronounce your name?
Ebby, that's fine. Yeah, that's right.
Ebby. Okay, well, first of all, I need to make one correction.
Okay.
Football is the best sport in the world. Okay, now that I clarify that. Oh my gosh, yeah, anyway. Are you?
Yeah, I love football too.
I haven't stopped watching the World Cup since I was young. Mexico, 86.
Wow.
And that's when, like, I was very little. My passion was like, and that's it. After that, I've been following since 86, 90, 94, etc.
Wow, interesting. That's really cool.
Yeah. So are you also involved in recruiting, or only in representing players who have been allocated to a team?
When you say recruiting, do you mean like scouting and finding players?
Scouting the players.
Yes,
Scouting is the better word.
I do a little bit of scouting, because scouting, I mean, you need that technical ability. You need to be able to see a player and think, yeah, this player is gonna, yeah. So my technical ability is lacking a little bit. I mean, that's what it's something I'm planning to work on a bit more. I mean, I can watch a game and know whether somebody had a good or a bad game, but it's a bit more than that. Like trying to find a rough diamond, you need some real skill to do that. So yeah, so I tend to focus more on like the contract negotiation. So I have academies I work with in Nigeria.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have some academies I work with in Nigeria, and you know, these ones I work with, they have a really good setup. You know, so the players live there, they school there. It's like being in boarding school, and they have their training and stuff. And one of them added me to their WhatsApp platform. So I actually watch their training. I watch, you know, sometimes when they get into trouble and they're fined for certain things, not turning up for prayers, and, you know, and it's quite strict. It's like being at school, because you've got to remember that some of those kids, their parents are illiterate. Some of them, their parents can't even afford to look after them, you know. So this is actually a blessing for them as well, to have an academy like that. You know, if their kid is talented, they're very happy to have them in an academy like that. So when I get a request from a club, say for instance in Europe, they tell me, we need a left back. We need him to be left-footed. We need him to be 185, you know, tall, you know, because they're normally the height restrictions as well. They'll tell you his age, which is a big thing, because they usually like players between the age of 18 and 22, 23. Now, FIFA frowns upon the exportation, as in, like, you know, the movement of players to other associations if they're minors, which is under the age of 18. You might have seen that some clubs have been fined for that, like Chelsea was in trouble for, you know, moving players that were below the age of 18. Yeah, so I don't go out and scout them myself, but I can just contact these academies and just say, this is what I'm looking for, send me some videos. And they will send me some videos, which I'll then send on to the club. And then the club can come back to me and tell me whether they're interested or not. So there's a club in Scotland at the moment that has seen some videos that I've sent, and they would like the boy to come and train with them when the season ends. You know, when they kind of start their pre-season. So he can just, they want to actually physically see him. They've seen the videos, they like the videos, but they want to see him on the ground.
Okay, thank you. That's
Does anybody have any question in class? What would you like to know? Or Dr. Liana, do you have any other question?
I do, as a matter of fact, if I
Okay,
may.
go ahead.
Dr. Odutola, let me know if I'm overreaching here.
No, go ahead,
So,
please.
The socioeconomics aspect of scouting or recruiting, and I can only talk from a different perspective, being Mexican with passion for football, and also seeing how we have splendid players, but unfortunately, unfortunately, the corruption is very high with the Mexican Federation of Football. And it seems like only those players who come from a different socioeconomic background end up making it to play in the different, either local teams or in the national team. Do you see something like that as well in let's just say West Africa?
Yeah, we do see that, or rather, I do see that. It does happen. And I think Dr. Colin mentioned, the politics that comes into football sometimes as well. Yeah, so you see the politics, you see the corruption. And it's
you have kids playing on the streets, developing that talent, with no academy to scout them, and it's so unfortunate.
Yeah.
We seem to have the same problem in Latin America.
Yeah, I don't think it's as much. I mean, when it comes to the scouting of the players themselves, I know some of the clubs. One of the academies I work with, he's from the south of Nigeria, but he's constantly in the north. I mean, if you know anything about the northern part of Nigeria, you know how rough and how dangerous it is at the moment. But he's so passionate about helping some of those kids because he said that's where the rough diamonds are. I speak to him sometimes and he'll tell me about his night before, dodging, bullets and all kinds of things. So from that angle, there are a lot of people that do go out and scout those. But I think when it comes to maybe getting the exposure, that's where the problem comes in. Like taking players on for the national team, that's where you have what you're talking about now, because it's usually if you have a godfather who works in, when I say godfather, as in somebody who has more or less taken you on as a mentee or something, or somebody who is influential. And that's why you find sometimes you see people complaining about the national teams, like the Ghanaian national team. There was a big one during the African Cup of Nations because two of the players there were actually owned, or rather they played for the club that was owned by the Ghana FA president, but they weren't qualified to be there. And straight away that was, there was uproar about that. You shouldn't be taking this as your own, personal project or something. This is, Ghana, we want to win matches. We need to have the players that are qualified. So we have it in that sense, and some collect money as well, some collect money to field players. So we do have that. We do have that element. I think there's no way you can have so much money in a particular sport and not have corruption. Yeah. So that's my belief. Yeah. Any more questions?
Yeah. Let's go to the class. Is there anybody who wants to raise any question? Yes.
Evie, I saw on your website something about the STAR project.
Okay. Yeah.
Con men will scam young players.
Yeah.
Is that mostly just happening within the African continent, or is it kind of across FIFA?
To be honest, because my expertise is more or less in Africa, I only know about it happening in Africa, but I think I have seen something about South America. I think I've heard stuff about it happening in South America, where there are two angles to it. There's one where you're contacted via social media, say Facebook or Instagram, and somebody promises to invite you on trials. They tell you they're a scout from Chelsea, for instance, and that they have a trial for you, a 2-week trial. They'll groom you, they'll keep speaking to you. They may even send you money, because even £1 in the UK, you convert that to Ghana cedis or Nigerian naira, and that's a lot of money for them. So for somebody who is sending maybe £5 over, it's not a big deal. But for the person that's receiving it, it's a big thing. They'll assume that this person really cares for them, really has their best interest at heart, that they're a good person. And after a while, when the fake agent realizes that they've got this player where they want them, they'll tell them, right, okay, I'm inviting you on trials. However, you're going to have to pay for your visa, and you're going to have to pay for something like your medical insurance or travel insurance. So they will ask the player to send it to them. And it's usually by a Western Union or MoneyGram, which is non-traceable. You're unable to trace it. Once they find that money and send it, that's it. They get blocked, you know, by that person. And then the other angle is the human trafficking angle, where they actually take the player. You know, they'll tell the player, we have an offer for you, and they'll even pay for the player to come over, because they know that when the player gets over, they know what they're going to get from the player. They'll probably, you know, put the player to work in a factory or somewhere, and the player's not going to get any money, but the factory will be paying the person. So they're going to recover the money that they spent bringing the player to Europe. You know, so those kind of things happen. I don't hear about the human trafficking much these days, because there are certain things being put into place now to try and prevent that. So some of the associations, before you can actually, some of the embassies, before you can actually get a visa, they will request what they call an introduction letter from your football association. So your football association needs to be able to say, I know this player, he has played for X, you know, number of teams, or he's played for so-and-so academy. And that's the FA more or less putting their reputation on the line to say, we know this player and we know he's a footballer. Because a lot of those players that are actually trafficked, they're not actually, some of them, I wouldn't even say they're players. You know, they're just maybe young boys that play on the street and believe that they have something. And once somebody contacts them and tells them they have something, you know, tells them that they're good, they've watched them play, then unfortunately, they fall into that trap.
Okay, before we move,
Answers the question anyway. It's Africa mainly that I see.
okay, you got a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
let's-
yeah.
All right. I was so in regards to like moving players between clubs, I noticed that like Europe tends to have a lot of hostility towards immigration coming from Africa, from like Turkey and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you noticed any hostility towards players being brought from Africa, from like, you know, European FIFA.
Not from UEFA and FIFA, no. The problems we usually have are from the embassies, because there's a certain criteria that they need to meet before they can bring them over. So if they don't meet that criteria, which is, you know, includes stuff like, you know, being able to have enough money, because the thing is that sometimes because of the level that the players are playing at, they can't get some of the bigger teams, the you know, the rich ones that can afford to pay for their accommodation whilst they're going on trials, for instance. So some clubs will actually tell you, we can't afford your accommodation, we can't afford to feed this player. So all that would need to be done by either the agent or the player's parent or something. So when you're actually applying for a visa, the embassy would want to know who is paying for this trip and how is the player going to feed and survive for the 2 weeks whilst he's out there. Now, normally, under normal circumstances, you will get an invitation letter from the club saying the accommodation and feeding is our responsibility. But if you're unable to get that because the club is not going to pay, then whoever is putting the visa in needs to be able to say, this is, you know, how I'm going to survive. And if they're unable to do that, then, you know, the embassy will say no. So that's the problem I've seen in the past, but not from UEFA and FIFA. That was your question, wasn't it?
Yeah, if there was any like internal hostility within the, you know, footballing system towards African players.
No.
Well,
I haven't personally seen any.
let's put it this way again. I didn't think we will go into this, but just hold this question and it will piggyback on what he's saying. The question of racism
Yeah.
in sports. There are a lot of African players we know that the city where they go to play is very hostile to that. Just hold on that, we'll talk about that. But I just want Shelley, if she doesn't mind, to just she played for UF.
Hey.
Yes, Shelley played for UF. And her first love on the African continent is Rwanda. So
Wow.
could you just give us a little tip of your life as a because we need to get into the female football.
Yeah.
The female footballers don't earn as much as the men. Their games, now I'm being controversial here, Shelley. So you can throw rotten potatoes at me, I don't mind. The games of the female footballers are not as interesting as the men. And so we pay them less. But they have been clamoring that they want equal pay, you know? So Shelley, tell us a little bit. Oh yeah, I can see. Thank you.
Wow. Well, it's great to meet everyone. Glad I got that intro in. Thank you. Yeah, so a little bit about my background. I played here at University of Florida, and then I went on to play for the U23 national team in their pool. And so that's kind of the highest level I've played at before. And then I went on to play semi-pro after I graduated, and also did a ton of soccer missions kind of all over the globe. So I've gone to Haiti. I think it's like 23 countries or something like that at this point, but a lot of it was sport based. And so, yeah, I've seen soccer, football viewed in various roles as a female. I've traveled with women's and men's teams together. So you really get to see the difference between how, say in Brazil, when the women's are supposed to be playing for an hour and we get kicked off so the men can play and we only play for 30 minutes. Something that doesn't happen in the US as much, but is very real in other countries. And then you've seen in Uganda when I played, I remember the girls being there, like, why are you so feminine? They kept saying like, you're so girly, and so the context of what a female athlete looks like in their culture has a lot of stereotypes to it. And so those are just things that stick out right away that I'm like, yeah, it is different. And you kind of have to learn and ask a lot of questions. I was a commissioner of a football soccer league in Rwanda. So I, after playing semi-pro and doing various roles, teaching, coaching, all of that, I moved to Rwanda to be a athletic director, soccer coach, service learning coordinator, and then ended up being a commissioner of a league, a high school league in Kigali, Rwanda. So even with that, I've got to learn what it was like to work with a French school and a Belgium school and Kigali school, like all of these Rwandan school. And so, yeah, you learn a lot about international culture and what you stop assuming your norms are their norms and asking more questions. And so for me, that has been a learning curve. I will say football specifically is an international language, in my opinion. It can unite nations across the world. You don't have to speak a language that is a language of its own, in my opinion. So yes, that's kind of my international experience with the game. And then as a female, I think a lot of countries are still developing. They're getting, I think European countries on the female side are catching up with America and our level of play. And then I would say other cultures are starting to accept, even in the Middle East, I've seen some of them being allowed to start competing. And yes, they have their own space and their own place and they wear their own attire, but they are actually allowed to play, which I think is amazing. And so, yeah, we're just starting to see the continual growth of that. But there is we're not the same place as men, not in the paying, not in the development facilities or funding. And I will say I've heard of corruption in that. America is a little different than other countries. There's a Ministry of Sport. And so money kind of comes in through the Ministry of Sport and can be dispersed through various teams. And so as a female sport and the amount of money they get versus the male side can be different as well. So those are a few things that come to mind. Is there anything specific I can address on that?
Okay, well, let's now move on to talk about female football and on the African continent. And one of the things Abi did tell me was that there are not a lot of professional female football teams on the African continent, but I'll give it to her. Please talk a little bit about the female football teams on the African continent.
Yeah, well, my expertise isn't female football. So, I mean, I only know a little bit. And I feel guilty every time I say this because I get female footballers. I've had like Nigerian and Ghanaian female footballers contact me, assuming because I'm female that I'd be well, au fait with female football. But one thing, working with them on trying to help them, move from club to, from club to club. One thing I did actually find out is that a lot of them don't actually get paid. A lot of them don't get paid. A lot of them work part-time. So it's like they have to work somewhere and then they'll train in the evenings because it's just not developed. I mean, if say, for instance, in Ghana, as I said, even the men don't get paid that well. So you can just imagine what it's like for the females. And when I've tried to bring female footballers out of Africa, even in Europe, in some places in Europe, they say that they don't have a professional league and they'll have to find them work. So they'll have to find them work, and they'll be playing football as like semi-professionals whilst they work. So that's the kind of knowledge I have on female football. I mean, there is a league in Nigeria and in Ghana as well, because I do know players that play for those leagues. The current female goalkeeper for the Nigerian national team, she played in Rivers State for Rivers United. So they do have a league, but the pay they get is not great. I don't know the exact figure, but I just know that they don't get paid that well. And all of them are just kind of looking to leave the country.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but Shelley's here, and you can tell me without being politically correct. Do you really think that female football is interesting enough for me to spend 1 hour of my time and pay the gate fee to go and watch females playing football?
I haven't done it yet, but I went to the World Cup. I went to France, the Women's World Cup. I went to watch Nigeria and Germany, and I loved it. I loved the atmosphere. I loved the way, the women's sport is definitely growing. I loved the fact that it wasn't full, but it was nearly full. And there were people showing the same kind of passion they show when, the men play the game. I was sat with some of the Nigerian Federation, and I was really impressed with that as well, because usually when it comes to the men, they're always there, they want to show their faces. And with the women's, you tend not to find them turning up. But you had some of the NFF who were there, and they were really proud to be there. You could see them like really representing and really supporting the girls. And yeah, it was really good. So going back to your question, well, I didn't pay for that ticket, but the fact that I actually paid to go to France and paid for my hotel, I think is something itself. And it's not like I went there and then I just kind of fell into the World Cup. I actually went because I wanted to go to the World Cup. So yeah, I definitely think it is. I think some people say that it's not as exciting because you don't get the controversies that you get with the men's game. You don't get a lot of the fighting and the fouling and stuff like that. And that's what a lot of people like to watch. But aside that, I have enjoyed watching the female game when I have watched it.
Okay, let's listen to Shelley. What would you say? Unmute yourself.
Sorry, it was stuck. I would say the game is very different in a lot of ways. I think women tend to be, in my opinion, a little bit more strategic, not quite as fast. That's not the speed of play for us. So I think it is a different game to watch. And if you appreciate that, then you will enjoy it as much as a men's game. I think you're not going to have all the stars that a men's team will have. I mean, just publicity wise, we don't get the same views and market it as well. So we don't have, the big names as much, but in general, yeah, I think it's definitely worth your time. I think there's an element of like women encouraging and empowering women to play a sport at a high level. And there's that you can't really underestimate or undervalue. Especially culturally, I think in African culture that it's growing and that women are allowed to play, they're encouraged, and they're starting to play more. And I think even just the change of that and watching it on TV allows them to think there's that common, if they can do it, I can do it. And so for that, yeah, but I do understand how men are like, oh, it's not as exciting, or women, I can totally see that, but I do think it is a different game, in my opinion.
I mean, in Africa, it's nice to see both in the women's and the men's game, how people are actually more accepting now of footballers. Because even I get parents like hounding me, I need some advice. I need to speak to you about my young boy. He's 17 years old and we're looking for, and they'll call and call and call. And I'm like, wow, because you find a lot of the older generation, they will tell you that when they told their parents they wanted to play football, their parents disowned them. They're like, no, if you're going to play football, then you're on your own. You're paying for your own, go find your own house. But now it's like parents actually want their kids to be involved. Both girls and boys want them to be involved in football. which is a beautiful thing. I guess the money that you see these days is not what you used to see back in those days. So maybe they felt like, you know, for what it was worth at the time, I'd rather my son was a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. Whereas now, you know, there's a lot more money in it. So, you know, they all want to be, you know, the father or the mother of a well-known international footballer.
Well, there are some words that you have used, and I just want us to end on that note because that's what this class is about. And I'm ending it, if you can see my screen, and you can see export of talents. Africa has been known to be the exporter of raw materials. And now again, we're talking about sports, and they're exporting the very best. They're exporting them to Europe to go and play and develop the game in Europe. There are different sides of it, and AB and everybody here, you can chip in what you think about this idea of the best. You know, the selection is that it's the best of the best that they pick and they go to Europe to go and play. The question is, what is happening to the local league on the continent? And with everything football, I told you, is an ecosystem. If you develop sports, it means you would develop a stadium. It means you would develop a transport system. It means you would develop marketing. It means you would develop sponsors. And when all these are absent, what happens? So that is one. The second thing is called, and I think AB used it, it's called the rape of Africa. We've watched 2 movies about rape. Now, is sports one of the older men raping Africa? So what are your thoughts? Let's go with that. Anybody can take it. What do you feel? What do you think?
Okay.
The idea of export of talents, and then that phrase of exporting, of raping the African continent.
Okay, I may be best qualified out of all of us to kind of kick this off because it's something I do. Right, so I think I touched on this a little bit. Now, the talent, yes, we are taking the best of the best from Africa, but one thing I told one of my mentors who also questioned me about taking the good talent from Africa is, if I don't do it, somebody else will do it. Because unfortunately, the leagues are not developed enough. And this goes back to what we talked about before about corruption. So we know that Nigeria has, you know, a wealth of resources. We know that Nigeria is actually a rich country. Forget what you see on TV. Nigeria is a rich country, but because of corruption, nothing can develop. So if we don't develop the leagues in Africa and pay the players good salaries, why would they want to stay? Why would they stay when they're watching, you know, players who probably are less talented than they are in other leagues in Europe making big money? They want a piece of that. So they actually want to go out and, you know, and play in these leagues. And I mean, that's one angle, but then the other angle is because these leagues are so well developed and they're so well publicized and televised, everybody sees them and everybody knows the big names in the big leagues. The players also want that. So it's not just a fortune, they want the fame as well. You know, they want the fact that they're, you know, they'll be on big billboards and you know, kids will be screaming their names in school and have like magazines with their, you know, sticky posters on it and stuff. So yeah, Dr. Colley, it's a difficult one, but it's probably going to be happening for a while until we manage to develop the leagues and pay the footballers a good salary. And also, like you mentioned, sponsors. Now, sponsors also, I mean, sponsors give some money, but they want something in return. Now, if it's not attractive for them, if the league is not attractive, why would any sponsor, how would you attract sponsors? I tried to attract sponsors for a couple of clubs in Ghana. And when you speak to sponsors, they say, what's in it for us? MTN is one of the big sponsors in Africa when it comes to football. Their head office is in South Africa. So they do South Africa, Ghana, and Nigeria as well. You get Nike and Adidas as well, who come and do, little sponsorships in Africa as well. But if it's not attractive for a sponsor, then they're not going to put their money there because they know they're not going to get anything out of it and they're not going to get the exposure. A lot of clubs in Nigeria, for instance, in fact, maybe all the clubs in Nigeria, none of them actually have their own stadium. In Ghana, Ashanti Gold has its own stadium. It's the only club I know in Ghana that has its own stadium. So it's not even like you can put branding, you can't take the sponsorship and put branding around the stadium because it doesn't belong to you. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Good. Shelley, do you want to drop anything in?
Yeah, I just think I would follow up too and say, them being on in these leagues, English Premier League, and they become ambassadors for their country, and there's a lot of pride in that, I think, as well, to say, hey, we have somebody representing us, both at be on national teams, but also in high levels of the sport. And so that is not necessarily the case if they stay in their own country and they compete at that level. And I think you also have to consider the financial piece, of course, because they're in third world countries, developing countries, and then you're asking them to stay and build a system that is corrupt and not take the opportunity to gain financial well-being. And so that is a big bind to ask somebody in a situation like that.
Can I just chip something in? There is something in football called training compensation and solidarity compensation. So training compensation is money that's paid when a football player signs his first professional contract. So all the clubs that train the player between the ages of 12 and 21 get some of this money. Solidarity compensation is a similar kind of thing, but that goes on for the rest of the player's life. So for instance, if a player is transferred for 1 million, 5% of that 1 million will be taken out and distributed amongst all the clubs that train the player from the age of 12 to 23. That's the difference. Training compensation is 12 to 21, solidarity is 12 to 23, and that's for the rest of the player's life. Now, I've worked on a lot of solidarity compensation claims. There was a club in Ghana who received 105,000 euros. You can imagine that was the club that trained Michael Essien, one of the clubs that trained Michael Essien. Now, you can imagine what that amount is once it's converted to Ghana cedis. But what do they do with it? FIFA has it in their regulations because it's meant to go back to Africa. Well, go back to whichever country that trained the player, but obviously my expertise is Africa. So it's meant to go back to Africa and help with the development of the players. It's like saying, they've developed one Michael Essien, we're giving you this money to develop another one. And if on any occasions, like there's something they call a player passport, and that lists all the clubs that the player played for from the age of 12. Now, if, say, for instance, nobody knows who trained the player, because it happens, it might be a club that doesn't exist anymore, and maybe they only know from, say, the age of 16 who trained the player. All those other clubs or the spaces on the player passport, that money would go to the federation. So it still needs to go to Africa, and even if there isn't a club, it should go to that federation and use for sports development. But where does anybody see it? Even the money that FIFA gives to clubs to prepare for big tournaments, you'll hear some of the Nigerian footballers complaining about being in cockroach infested hotels, whereas you'll see the England team, chilling in like luxury. And it's not as if the Nigerian Football Federation haven't been given the money. It's just that it's probably been misused. And it's not just Nigeria, it just happens all over Africa. So these are some of the things, these are some of the issues. Corruption is a big problem when it comes to development of the league.
Okay, well, if you have any pressing issue you would like to present before they go, I will continue the class, but you're all welcome to stay. But before Aby goes and Shelley, let me tell you very quickly what I collected in terms of the bet. there is a game tonight, and I'm sure she has an eye on her TV screen. Nigeria is playing Ghana right now.
Welcome,
for the World
qualifiers.
Cup. Yes, it started at 6 p.m. and I have been able to collect some bets, and I'm going to just quickly share
Oh dear.
what's the people are placing bets on the game. So here is what I have. Somebody said, I have a feeling Ghana will win tonight's game. Perhaps it's for the best, Dr. Shola Adeneko. And one of the known entertainment journalists in Nigeria, Femi Akintunde Johnson, is using the Lord's Prayer. Says, Father, give us this day our neighbor's spine. That is a parody of give us this day our daily bread. So it says, Father, give us this day our neighbor's spine. Just 2 unanswered goals will be okay. Amen. And I know that AB also has, but it's going to be between me and AB what she already thought about. She has a mixed feeling about the game.
I'm not confident.
The Nigerian versus Ghana game. Ghana called the Black Stars and Nigeria called the national Eagles. The Eagles, huh?
Super Eagles.
Super Eagles. And
Okay, that's cool, man.
they call this Super Eagles because part of the coat of arms of Nigeria, you have the eagle on it. And it's supposed to be a very powerful team. But we've had our good days. We don't know what today will bring. But that's the note on which I want to release AB so that she can go and watch the game. And then I will contact her to find out whether her prediction worked well or whether it was Dr. Adeneko who said it looks like Ghana might win. We don't know. Let me just drop something in.
Dr. Kole. For those who watch the MLS, one of the players I manage plays for Chicago Fire, actually. Chicago Fire, one of the players I manage, Chinonso Ofo, plays for Chicago Fire.
Oh, okay.
So you could, yeah.
Well, there are not too many football fans in this class. Soccer fans. So all of that is like, thank you.
Like, exactly. It's like, woo.
Yes, we will research it.
Maybe they could become soccer fans from today and start watching Chicago Fire.
Yeah, I'm going to get Shelley to come and maybe we would steal some of the footage. Maybe she would be able to inspire.
We're gonna play?
Well, maybe we should have a game. Shelley's team versus the African film and media. We don't know, but something is going to happen. Yes.
We can play in the Florida gym where I work. You guys can come on over. We'll play on the court. Play football instead of soccer.
Yeah, maybe you would have to teach us what to do first, and tell us what a goal is and what a foul is and all of that. Yeah, they don't even know what the ball looks like. Never mind. Well, it's been a pleasure. Like I said, I'm going to conclude and move on to the other things we have. Our class ends at 4:45, so we still have 45 minutes. You can hang around with us, but if you have to go, we already understand. Thank you very much for the contribution. At least you've given us a lot of food for thought, and we'll be playing with some of the ideas. So thank you very much. We hope we can always call back. All right then. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. All right.
Where do you watch the match?
What?
Where do you watch the match?
Well, I will tell you later. Let me do this. Let me do this. We would if I do this, I can. Okay. I wanted Elena had written something. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop recording. Yes.